This chart compares two 17th-century commodities, gold and cloves. A single kilogram of cloves in Europe cost the equivalent of a kilogram of gold, generating profit margins of 800% for anyone completing the voyage. This wealth was tied to a specific geography. Indonesia produced the spices, India supplied the sought-after cotton textiles, and China supplied silk and tea. These goods flowed strictly westward toward wealthy European buyers. Access was governed by a rigid, two-part handoff. Arab traders dominated the routes across the Arabian Sea to the Middle East, while Italian merchants from Genoa and Venice guarded the Mediterranean leg into Europe. This was a perfectly functioning, highly exclusive supply chain. A small group of middlemen occupied every strategic choke point, ensuring they controlled all access and hoarded the resulting wealth. That system broke in 1453, when the Ottoman Empire captured Constantinople. They blockaded the old land routes, instantly cutting off Europe's supply of Eastern goods. This supply chain crisis triggered the Age of Discovery. European powers were forced to fund expeditions into the Atlantic, searching for a direct ocean bypass to the east that didn't rely on Ottoman-controlled land. Long-distance navigation became possible through the use of the astrolabe. By measuring the position of the stars and the sun, sailors could finally determine their latitude in the open ocean, far from any coastline. To prevent conflict over these routes, Portugal and Spain had the Pope divide the world via the 1494 Treaty of Tordesillas. A vertical line was drawn through the Atlantic. Lands east went to Portugal, while lands west went to Spain. This treaty provided Portugal with a clear legal framework. Backed by the Church and the Crown, they now had the confidence to aggressively target the eastern trade routes. When Vasco da Gama arrived in Calicut in 1498, he realized South India was politically fragmented. The Mughal Empire did not yet exist, and there was no unified central naval power capable of repelling heavily armed foreign ships. Portugal's economic approach was distinct from its later rivals. Their trade was operated as the Estado da India, a state enterprise directly controlled and funded by the Portuguese crown. The Portuguese crown intended to secure a total monopoly by forcibly removing the Arab traders who had dominated the region for generations. Because Portugal was a small nation with limited manpower, they could not conquer India's massive land-based states. Instead, they devised a strategy to conquer the water. Under Governor Almeida, Portugal adopted the Blue Water Policy. They deprioritized territorial conquest on land in favor of achieving total maritime supremacy. This policy was enforced through the Cartas system, a state-sponsored protection racket. All non-Portuguese ships were required to purchase a pass. Those that refused were attacked and their cargo seized. This system was cemented through military force. In 1509, at the Battle of Diu, Portugal used its superior naval artillery to crush a joint coalition of the Sultan of Gujarat, the Mamluks of Egypt, and the Zamorin of Calicut. Economic control was paired with cultural brutality. The Portuguese administration used the Goa Inquisition to investigate and torture local populations, using religious orthodoxy as a tool for political and social control. Through strategic violence and protection rackets, Portugal successfully dismantled the centuries-old merchant networks of the Indian Ocean, replacing them with an iron-fisted, militarized cartel. Maintaining such a violent monopoly proved unsustainable. Portugal became imperially overextended, diverting critical resources away from India to support their far more profitable colonies in Brazil. Internally, the Estado da India began to rot. Corruption became systemic among officials, while regional powers like the Marathas launched increasingly successful attacks on Portuguese land positions. The geopolitical balance shifted in 1588 when the British Navy destroyed the Spanish Armada. Since Spain controlled Portugal at the time, this defeat shattered Portuguese naval supremacy in the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. With their naval invincibility gone, the oceans were open to new competitors. The bloated Portuguese state cartel was now too weak to defend its exclusive trade rights. Two new powers, Britain and the Dutch Republic, rushed into the vacuum. They arrived with a model of colonization that was fundamentally different from the Portuguese state enterprise. Instead of relying on a single state treasury, they utilized the joint stock company. By pooling private capital from thousands of investors, the Dutch VOC and the English East India Company could scale their operations far more rapidly than any monarch. These companies established a trilateral trade network. They traded Indian cotton textiles for spices in Indonesia, then sold those spices back in Europe. This agile corporate model easily outcompeted the rigid Portuguese system. Portugal's violent blueprint permanently changed the Indian Ocean, but their inflexible cartel ultimately cleared the way for the corporate empires that would eventually conquer the entire subcontinent.